trouble falling asleep. I have no problem staying asleep once I've fallen asleep. In fact, in college one time I slept through a fire alarm that included my RA barging into my room and yelling at me. I had no idea. And even crying babies don't wake me up, just ask my wife. One will keep me up if I'm already awake, but it won't wake me up. And so when I can't fall asleep, and my family is soundly asleep, I do what a lot of people in my generation do, and that is I binge watch TV shows. I will lay in bed with my iPad and watch episode after episode after episode until I'm finally ready to fall asleep. That's what binge watching is. It's, when you binge eat, you eat a lot. When you binge drink, you drink a lot. When you binge watch, you watch a lot. And it is actually changing the way that TV shows are produced and released. Things like Netflix and Hulu have sort of upped the game and have forced companies to really assess how they're going to develop a TV show and release it, because the way it's being consumed is different nowadays. And while it's true that its consumption is different, what has not changed all that much is how a story is told. I mean, there are basic components to it. You have a protagonist, there is some sort of problem that needs to be solved. Usually there's somebody who comes in to help the protagonist figure it out, and then there is some sort of resolution. The basic elements are there, from Star Wars to Legally Blonde to The Wizard of Oz. It's all just kind of there. Now, the details will change, right? The setting, the plot, things like that will shift a little bit depending on the story. But the general sort of form of it stays the same. And for some people, when they hear the story of Christ's resurrection, they think it's just that. It's another good story. Here's this Jesus who is the protagonist. The problem is that the world needs to be saved, so he and God hatch a plan, and his resurrection saves the day. But there's one problem with that. The story of Christ's death and resurrection is not just another story. Although in our gospel text, that is how the first hearers thought about it. The apostles themselves think it's an idle tale. Peter doesn't believe it. He's got to run to the tomb and see it for himself. Later on, Thomas has to touch Jesus' hands and his side for him to buy that Christ has risen from the dead. Why is that? Because in our experience, when someone is dead, they stay that way. I think I was talking to Pastor Jim a couple weeks ago at one of our midweek suppers, and he asked me how the funeral of my great aunt went. I said, well, it went fine. She didn't sit up. Because at funerals, you don't expect the dead person to sit up. We expect dead people to stay dead. And so it's no wonder that some people hear the story of the resurrection and think it's too good to be true. Dead people don't rise. And yet, the story that has been passed down in the church has never been understood as just a story. There were witnesses. The women first, the apostles later. Thomas himself actually touches Christ's hand inside. And their testimony gets passed on from generation to generation. But even early on, you hear in our epistle text this morning that Paul has got to set the record straight. Not for outsiders, but for the Christians gathered in Corinth. He says, if only we hope in Christ in this life, we are most of all to be pitied. Christ has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of the resurrection. He's making a point. Dear Christians gathered in Corinth, do you get it? Christ has been raised from the dead, which means all those who have died in Christ will raise from the dead too. This is no mere story. It's a fact that changes your life. See, a lot of people have theories and opinions about Jesus. He's this great moral teacher, right? He's this guy who did some good stuff. He helped people. But that's all talking about stuff that sort of mattered when he was around. Or these moral teachings only have an effect on us in our daily lives. But if all we do is think about Christ as someone who affects today, we miss the point. Because it's not just about how you live your life today. It's actually about how you're going to live your life forever. Meaning, you're actually going to be alive. Resurrection is no mere fairy tale. The world doesn't need another fairy tale. It's what an Episcopalian bishop said the other day, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. We don't need more fairy tales. We don't need more stories. We don't need more things to teach us how to be good people. What the world needed was a cross and an empty tomb. And this morning, that is what we celebrate. Not fiction, but fact. And this morning, just as the women ran to the tomb and didn't find him, just as later on in that day, later on in Luke's gospel, people see Jesus, you're going to see Jesus. In fact, you're going to taste him. His very body, his very blood. And I don't mean in some spiritual sort of way. I'm going to lay that out right now. Because I actually believe that when you come to the rail this morning, you're receiving physically the very body and blood that hung on that cross and came out of the tomb. You are encountering the same resurrected Lord that the disciples and the women and an untold number of witnesses did. Because Christ is not dead. He is risen. He is risen indeed. And this morning, we meet him at the rail. Because the fact of the matter is, where you will go, where I will go, is where Christ has already gone. We will go into the grave one day. We will fall asleep. We will stay asleep. But not forever. Because just as Christ died and rose again, so too will you. So too will those people you love who died in Christ. You will put your arms around them again. They will have breath in their lungs, blood in their veins. You and I will rise again, not because we have the ability to, but because Christ already did. Christ is risen.